we're talking about event evaluation. Event evaluation is one of those steps that we really don't necessarily allocate a lot of time for. We're so busy juggling multiple roles, multiple responsibilities, that event evaluation can get easily swept under the table. But I'm going to encourage you through this webinar to take some of these tips, tricks, suggestions, and apply it as you see fit to your events, because this is going to ultimately create more sustainable practices, longer term event goals, and it'll give you just a lot more feedback for your sponsors, your boards in general. So, but before we jump into any of me talking, I'm going to start us off with an exercise. I love a good exercise. We're going to discuss a lot of goals and tracking methods today, so I thought this would be a good start to the webinar. So for the following events, list what you think would be the primary goal or objective of the event. You can do so in the chat. Let's start with a silent auction. Say your business district is trying to throw a silent auction. What types of primary goals do you think that type of event is going to be focusing on? Yes, I see. Fundraising, number one. We got some, also a secondary goal could be exposure for the businesses who donate. Great. Second event, a street fair. What would be the primary goal that a business district has for throwing a street fair? Sarah says community engagement. I guess this, you're also feel free to, if folks don't feel comfortable chatting, if you do want to use that hand raise function, that's fine too. Engaging the community is a big one. Attendance to drive traffic, and then awareness to the businesses in that area. Great goals. Let's go on to that last event. Business mixers. What is the primary goal of a business mixer? Yes, Sarah says membership recruitment. Anybody else? Right people in the room, get connections with the city and businesses, networking. Okay, connected, great. Love all of these goals that you can identify very quickly. Now we're going to go to the harder version. Similar exercise, but instead this time I'm giving you primary goals. So these primary goals are something that we just identified: fundraising, attendance, exposure of the brand, or exposure of your business district association, which would be your brand. So this time you're going to look at these goals, and I'd love for you, as we go through them, to list some of your ideas on how you would track this. So maybe this one's pretty straightforward and easy, but how would you track raising money if that's your goal? Anybody have the fancy answer? Count it, says Sarah. Yes, but what sorts of things do you need to consider when you're counting it? Because it's great if you pull in a bunch of money. Great. We also have resources suggested like QuickBooks or spreadsheets, treasurer reports. But specifically, right, you have to look at your profit. You have to look at how much you spent on the event versus how much you actually brought in to figure out exactly how much money you raised. So counting, great, but there are a lot of variables too to consider in whether or not you met your goal. Next one, attendance. How would you go about tracking attendance, and what sorts of things do we need to consider when it comes to tracking for this goal? Anybody have any ideas for the attendance primary goal? How am I going to track if we meet our number of attendees? Oh, we got Jacob says have volunteers that are specifically tasked with counting, right? Because if there's 500 people there, it's hard to estimate. Doing a drawing. Ooh, I might need a little bit more information about a drawing, like like a raffle drawing. So for the attendance one, Sarah said sign-in sheets, which would be a great way to track numbers, or online ticket sales. That's another great one. Cool. Oh, yes. So clarification about the drawing one is like how many people entered to get picked out of the raffle. So these are all great methods for tracking attendance. And then last but not least, how would you track whether or not your business district association got exposure? So we kind of made it a little harder each time. This last one is a little bit trickier, but what are some strategies for tracking the exposure of your business district association? Audrey mentioned new members or people expressing interest. Yeah, what's the buzz? Ooh, website traffic, looking at social media followers, seeing if you got any new followers, and online insights, reviews of past actions. These are great. These are all really good inspirations for what we're going to be talking about today. I'm glad that you're all you're participating a bunch, because we are a small group, so I'm excited to see so much participation. So after that exercise, I think it's important to then step back and talk about why does event evaluation matter? And I've only highlighted 3 reasons, but there are a plethora of reasons to talk about event evaluation. Here are some of the most important ones, I think. Number 1, your post-event evaluation will convince sponsors, companies, or stakeholders to support upcoming events. So again, we're always finishing one thing and then moving straight on to the next in this world. I want to encourage you to think about how your current event is actually preparing you for your next event as well. So this step of evaluating and collecting the data, presenting the data, is going to make it easier for your future event when you are trying to make an ask of a sponsor. Secondly, it will determine the long-term sustainability of your event and if major adjustments need to be made. Sustainability in events is a conversation that we've had an entire webinar on, but when I'm talking about event sustainability, I mean in this context, how many times can we do this event? How can this event be repeated in the future? Is this going to be something that we as a business association can continue forward? And if not, what can we do if it is something that we want to continue? What can we do so that it is it's something that we can see in the future? And then lastly, it allows you to see if there is an increase in awareness around your business association or your brand. So I mentioned before that as a business association, you're kind of responsible for this brand. Includes your logo. What do you do? Who do you help? What sorts of expectations should the audience have of your business association? And when it comes to event evaluation, this is a great way to test if you're getting across what you do to the general audience. Anybody else have any other reasons why event evaluation matters off the top of their head? We have a great comment, says documenting the events with pics and videos creates easily understood or easily used content for the next installation. Another great point, right? So event evaluation can set you up for success going forward because you already have a bunch of awesome content that you captured. Any other reasons why we haven't touched on? Okay, feel free to drop them in the chat. So, oh, yes. We just got 2 great suggestions. Sarah says whether or not that an event evaluation can determine whether or not you can have reoccurring events. Is this kind of a rinse and repeat style event where we can make it a monthly thing? And then also we had a great suggestion about grants. So if you are somebody who applies for grants, because we have an amazing grant program here at Venture Portland, using previous events to then showcase what you're capable of might mean more money in the future. So great additions. So now that we've understood why event evaluation matters, I want us to put on our science caps and go back to when we heard about the scientific method. Everybody here relatively familiar with that scientific method, you know, hypothesis, experiment, right? We all remember that 8th grade science class somewhere in the back of our brain. So I think about event evaluation in a very scientific way, and I think that the scientific method can be applied to event evaluation. So on the left-hand side, you see this adorable little graphic, has the 6 steps involved. And then on the right, I created a hypothetical event, and I applied the scientific method to determine how I would go about evaluating the event. So for instance, with the very first step, which is an observation, as a business district associate, I've observed that our business association needs new members. So then the next step is a question. How can we get more members, more businesses to join? The third step is a hypothesis. And if you remember, a hypothesis is an if-then statement. So if so-and-so happens, then conclusion. So the hypothesis for the event is, if we host a business mixer, then we will gain multiple new members. Hypotheses are educated guesses. They're ideas that then can be tested and measured, and then you'll draw conclusions from them. The difference between a science experiment and an event is that your event is going to be where the experiment takes place. So the planning and execution of the business mixer is the experiment. And after it's all said and done, you're going to step away and you're going to analyze your data. So I made up some data in this hypothetical business mixer. 24 people attended and 8 people left their emails, but only 1 new member. After I've analyzed that data, I then can take my conclusion, which is this was not the most successful way of gaining new members, especially if my hypothesis stated multiple memberships. So there could be plenty of other benefits. There could be lots of other data that showed that this was a great exercise for business district exposure and education. But when it came to membership, we only gained 1 new member. So the conclusion would be this wasn't really a successful experiment. Any questions about my example? Okay, I'm seeing shaking heads. Great. If that was super straightforward, then we can turn the tables over to you. So take a second. I want you to be a hypothetical event planner, and I want you to think about your own business district needs. So take a second and write down the 6 scientific steps for a hypothetical event. And then for the analysis piece, you're going to make up the data, just as I did. And then finally make a conclusion based on your analysis. So I'm going to give you a couple minutes, and I'm actually going to stop sharing the screen unless, well, maybe I'll give everybody a second, and then when it's discussion time, we can pause screen share. Everybody's writing. Looking good. Okay, scientists, everybody finishing up those final conclusions, maybe? Okay, I'm going to stop the screen share so I can see everybody again. Hello, hello. And I'd love to hear some of these hypothetical events and what you determined about your data. Anybody feel like unmuting themselves and sharing? Please go ahead. Everybody's feeling shy?
Sorry, I'm not shy.
Oh, hello.
No, I was answering my board president, so sometimes that intercedes.
Great.
So my little scenario was we do movies in the park. We need more people to attend our movies in the park. So from there, how do we get them?
Question.
The discussion was if we play blockbusters instead of just anniversary movies, then we've got a better things to pick from.
Great hypothesis.
So rent a blockbuster like, let's say, Frozen, because that brings out lots of people. At least it did a few years ago. Right. And if we needed 400 and let's say 500 showed up, then that was great. And the vendors were busy, and that was another analysis. They ran out of hot dogs. That was a mixed positive.
Right.
And then the final could be that this was a success and we need to quit running 40-year-old movies for our 40th anniversary. We really should have run blockbusters, although we did pretty well with nobody wanted to come see. Well, some people saw Annie. People really like to come see Poltergeist this summer. That was interesting, but we got yelled at because it wasn't very family friendly.
Okay.
That's okay. They voted for it and they showed up. So we'll just go with that. And next year we'll go back to blockbusters.
Awesome. Well, that was a great example of exactly how the scientific method can be applied to events. Thank you so much for sharing. And I would show up for Poltergeist, but I'd also probably show up for Frozen. So anybody else after that great share want to share what they came up with? We got some creatives in the room. I know some of you might have something up your sleeve. Ulika, you want to share anything? Not really? Okay. Sarah, did I get you?
I mean, I can share. I don't think I did it right, but
hey, this is a part of the exercise.
So my observation was we need funding for anti-crime projects. My question was, how do we get money? My hypothesis was if we write excellent grants, then maybe we'll get funding for this project. So my experiment was to write an excellent grant proposal. My analysis is that we got the grant. This is all, dreaming.
Right.
And in conclusion, grant writing is an effective way to raise money for my district.
Okay, I see. This is the best case scenario version, but I do think that that is, again, like, it seems like a silly exercise when, we're all adults here. We all know that to get funding, writing grants is a great way to do it. But I think that taking that scientific approach and then applying it to event evaluation just again shows that this is not something that you haven't done before. You've actually probably done it quite a bit in your day-to-day life where you've evaluated something and then made an adjustment, but it can start really with that if-then hypothesis. Like, I think that in and of itself is a very powerful approach, because it's stating that if we try this one thing, then something positive should happen. Yes, question or comment?
I was going to say where I see the downfall on committees usually is they just say they want more people. And I crossed out the word more and said 400 because if more could be one more. And in your example, the same thing as you were looking for X number of members or something, and you got 2, and it was clear that you wanted more than 1 member and so many emails. With the grant, it was great example too, because you want money and sometimes you don't care how much, you just want the grant and it is what it is. So I like that one too.
It's a great piece of feedback about goals and measurable goals and making sure that we are being specific with our goals. And we will jump right back actually into the PowerPoint unless, did anybody have any final?
I was just going to say that really helps with misunderstandings between a committee and a board, because a committee's goal might be to have 3 people show up and the board's expectation might have been to have 300 show up.
Yeah.
And so the definition of success might not sit well, depending upon if it wasn't clear in the first place that we only wanted 3, we got 3. You weren't at the meeting. I'm sorry, you thought we should have 300 next time. Our meetings are open to the board. We'd love to have you join us.
Right.
And help us set an expectation for 100, and maybe we could have met in the middle, and we'd have loved you to help us reach that goal. So.
Apologies, my audio and a passing by truck, but thank you so much for that clarification, because yes, again, even within the event planning team, if you have a board and then a committee or volunteers, like, it is incredibly taxing to try to get everybody on the same page. But again, with a scientific method, with an approach that is very clear and organized, it's easier to, again, just keep everything simple and straightforward and clear. So this actually bleeds right back into the presentation. So let's head back. Thank you again for participating in my fun little science experiment. So this exercise with the scientific method already sorts of answers a bunch of questions around the timeline behind event evaluation. I wrote, it's easy to think that event evaluation happens all at the end, but the truth, but that couldn't be further from the truth, right? As we know, it really starts in the before section when you're determining those clear and measurable goals. And like we said, it's really important to make sure that those goals are for everybody that's involved. Similarly, you have to decide what method you'll use to evaluate the objectives. Now, in the scientific method, there's a whole additional step where you're figuring out what the best method is for running your experiment. In our world, in the event world, it's really about what method of tracking will you use, because again, it's hard if you're in a 500-person event to try to count heads if you only are one person. Jacob suggested in our previous exercise, maybe you have volunteers that are responsible for taking, standing at the door and, you know, clicking a button every time somebody walks through. Meanwhile, you have during the event, this is where you have to collect the data, and you're measuring the impact of your event, especially if you have goals that are more about the quality of your event and how people liked it or how people were experiencing it. You sort of have to take a step back and observe. And then finally, after everything is said and done, that's when you can review and analyze data, draw conclusions about your event, and then correct any deviations. But it's really it's a process that happens all the way back in the beginning of the planning stages, and it'll only be able to be measured if you've thought about it in advance. It's very difficult to evaluate the success of an event if you haven't determined what goals you want to meet and how you're going to track them. My best example of this is when I was an educator for Portland Parks and Rec. I would lead field trips, and oftentimes my boss would be like, how are you going to evaluate the success of your field trip? And I would sort of just be like, oh, you know, if the kids had fun, if they learned stuff, if the teachers seemed happy. And while those are great answers, my boss encouraged me to sit down and think about at the very beginning before the field trip, how am I going to track their fun? You know, Are they laughing because they're having a good time, or did their friends tell them great jokes? Are they learning something new? What pieces of information am I actually going to ask them so I can see if they learned something? So all of that encouraged me to sit down before the field trip started and think through exactly how I was going to look at the field trip and what I was going to ask at the end to see if they actually learned something or if they had fun. Any questions about the timeline? Oop, that's a preview. All right, so if nobody has any questions about the timeline of event evaluation, then let's break down goals. Your event may have multiple goals, but learning the difference between qualitative and quantitative objectives will affect your method of tracking data. So just like my previous example of my field trips that I was leading, I had qualitative goals and then quantitative goals. Qualitative would be the goals that indicate the quality of the event. How did the audience feel? What was their overall experience? Did they learn about your business association? And then quantitative are goals that are that quantify how your event went. So number of attendees, profit versus loss, number of shares on social media, number of new members, number of collected emails. So lots of numbers, but qualitative versus quantitative, it's a good idea to have both. When I was thinking about the field trip, a qualitative goal was they had fun. They learned something new. A quantitative goal would be, you know, how many new schools signed up for my field trips afterwards, or how many children attended, how many classes. But basically, qualitative goals are going to have a different method to tracking than quantitative. All right, using a lot of scientific words today. So when measuring the qualitative pieces or ways of tracking them, I came up with 2 categories, but again, I think this is something that you could do a lot of different things to track this, but one of the biggest ways of getting qualitative to evaluate your qualitative goals would be feedback. Lots of us have seen after an event ends that there's a post-event survey of some kind. You can use Google Forms, you can use a good old pen and paper version. But I also think that having an anonymous suggestion box is something that has gone out of fashion and could be brought back at a business mixer. And then also just directly asking people, taking quotes. How did you like the event? What would you do differently? I think that the feedback piece can allow you to gauge whether or not the event was enjoyable. And then there's the observation side. So asking what the audience learned about your business association. It's nice to think that after a mixer, you've done a really good job talking about your business association and all the things you accomplish, and you think people are walking away with a bunch of takeaways. But do you know if they really are unless you ask? So it's important to, if education is one of your goals, to figure out how you're going to track that piece. It's one of the trickier ones because, again, you think you do a great job. I thought I did a great job on field trips, but if the kids walked away not knowing about pollinators, then I didn't necessarily meet that objective. Similarly, your experience matters. So describing what you saw and experienced is a piece of data. And you as the event organizer have a little bird's eye view of the event where you know all the moving parts. So you can mention just, you know, all what the hot dog stand ran out of hot dogs, you know, you're bigger view is going to give different feedback than the audience specific view. So make sure that you're incorporating your view, any volunteers, any other event staff in that observation piece. And then last but not least is taking pictures and videos. I think events can feel like a whirlwind when you're in them, and taking pictures and videos and then going back and really like looking through your event can indicate if the event felt frantic or if the event felt really sort of sparse and empty. So using visual mediums as well to then continue that observation. Oh, before I move on to quantitative, any other qualitative ways of tracking that come to your brain, or any? Oh yes, shout it out.
We just finished our Craft Brew Smackdown, which is a Rotary event where it's kind of like a wine walk, go to different locations. And one of the things we made sure to schedule was a debrief meeting of the committee at the same, we were meeting like every Tuesday at the end of as you're ramping up. And
right.
So we just went ahead and set one more for the following Tuesday. And the following Tuesday after that, because some people are out of town, to make sure we capture that impression, as you just said.
Yes.
And the verbals, and have somebody taking notes and bringing back all the things they heard while it's still fresh. Because sometimes we have not done that in rooms that I've been in, and a year later you're trying to remember the notes that
right.
Who said that, what do we need? Oh yeah, hand sanitizer, because the person needed to move the trash can and then pour beer again.
Right. Impressions, super big. Yes, it's super important to have those debriefs too. We're going to talk about post-event forms and whatnot, but I had a couple mentions in the chat as well. So MacBook Apple, I bet that's Nana, mentioned offer attendees to fill out a short survey or sign up for a newsletter, which enters them into a raffle. This will increase the fun factor while mining the event as much as possible. Not quite sure, probably minding the event, but basically, yeah, again, that survey piece and sign up piece is a great way to also see if you did a good job as an event planner, that the quality of the event was so good that people wanted to sign up to learn more. With the survey piece, there's always a hesitation to do a post-event survey via email. It doesn't necessarily generate a lot of feedback at times. So that's why it's great to either have the survey be on the way out, or something where, there's an incentive to fill out the survey. Jacob mentioned social media engagement. I would totally agree with this as well. There's a quantitative aspect of like how many clicks and whatnot, but then there's this qualitative aspect, which is, did they post pictures? Did they leave nice comments? Did they talk about the event in a good way? So totally another way to track quality experiences. Sarah says that you can have team members watching and engaging with attendees to get that info. Yes, it's important to get all their feedback, especially when it's in person right then and there. Oh, mining is great. Oh, maybe I misinterpreted the mining, which it's getting their emails for the next event. I see. Learning new words as well. And then Ulika said QR code survey. Yeah, so QR codes are everywhere these days. And again, having those at your event, having those at the table at your business mixer, like putting it at the table so that while it's going on, people can actively be giving anonymous feedback, is going to lower the bar, or it's going to lower the barrier, and it's going to allow more accessibility when it comes to how many people want to engage with this survey, especially in this digital era. Everybody has a camera phone and they might be familiar with QR codes. So great suggestions. Awesome. Okay, now we're going to switch gears and go to quantitative. Quantitative goals and how to track them. Number one, pretty straightforward, is counting. Tracking ticket sales and counting how many people attend, counting the number of mentions online. Counting is a huge one because ultimately numbers in quantitative goals are what speaks the loudest. And then I had graphs as another way to track data, because once you've counted, it's hard to also understand those numbers sometimes or track them. And one suggestion, if you're collecting RSVPs, is each month to chart their growth and see if there's a peak season or a peak week or day of the week that people seem to be extra engaged. Similarly, when you're talking about budget, you know, comparing your final budget to the event costs to calculate your profit. And then another idea would be creating a pie chart to show what social media platforms helped you get the best exposure. All of this is to say that counting is probably going to be your first step when it comes to quantitative goals. And then the next step is turning those numbers into a story, into something that other people can understand, something you can understand. But any other quantitative ideas when it comes to tracking that data? You know, it's a little less exciting than the qualitative one, but it's pretty much counting. Cool. A great suggestion would be like hashtag event name and a prize. So like, again, incentivizing people to use the hashtag and then counting exactly how many new posts were made based on that hashtag. These are exactly what we're talking about when it comes to tracking those quantitative goals. Okay. So another exercise, this is what I love to do. So the exercise that I have here is the Uptown Business Association has some goals for their street fair. Based on the data after the event is over, how would you evaluate the success of their event? So here are some goals. Number 1, have 400 people attend. Number 2, break even on the budget. So not necessarily make a profit, but at least cover our costs. Number 3, educate attendees on the Uptown Business District and what they do and the association. And then number 4 is to get more online exposure. And I use that word more, which we had a comment already be like, more is very ambiguous. So, but get more online exposure. And then the event happens, and then the data came in. They counted over 500 in attendance, but they went over budget by $650. Audience feedback did not indicate any new business district knowledge. People said that they've heard of it, but they don't quite know what they do or what district they're even talking about. And then 50 people mentioned the event online. So with all that, anybody want to say how they would evaluate this event? Feel free to unmute yourself or raise your hand. Drop it in the chat. All right, Sarah.
I mean, looking at this, I would actually consider the event a success, because I think that there's always something to learn or like take away or change. And so the fact that you had great attendance and there was good social media interaction, I feel like that is really positive. You know, next year when you do it, just work out the kinks in the budgeting and maybe, you know, tighten up how you spread information about your BGA. But I would say I would feel good about that.
Okay, great, thank you. Does anybody else agree with Sarah that this would be considered a successful event? You can raise your, Ulika is giving me a thumbs up. Audrey's kind of shaking her head. Okay, Kathy thinks so too. So most of us think that this is a successful event, and I think that, Sarah, you're pretty much nailed it. I would agree that for the most part, that it was mostly a success. When it comes to social media engagement, I always encourage folks to aim for about 10% of your overall attendees. That seems to be like about as many people that want to generate content while they're at your event. But so 50 people mentioning the event online is a really standard amount of interaction when it comes to a 500-person event. I do think that, right, going over budget and then the audience having mixed or no new information about the BDA means that there were some marks that were missed, and there might be some, you know, redirections that need to happen. But for the most part, all things considered, it seems like this event would be considered a success, with a few, you know, areas of improvement. Great. Okay, so we are short on time apparently, but that's good because this is an excerpt from an event evaluation form. So Eventbrite has a great free, extremely in-depth template that is a great resource for all event planners. I will definitely send that to all of you after the webinar wraps up. But here's the beginning piece, is when they're talking about preparing the meeting ahead of time. So after your event is over, you bring back the whole event team. It's going to break down all of your goals, how you went about either meeting them or why you didn't meet the goal. And basically, after I send this amazing resource to you, you can use it, or you can take the model of it and then make your own version for your event. You know, it might not benefit you to have like a 6-page document for each event, but at least this will give you a nice backbone if you wanted to create your district specific event evaluation form. I really encourage you to have a form of some kind after an event, even if it's just 1 page, because at this point, even though we're all mostly online, how do we let future event planners know about what we went through and what we learned? Having a document that you finish, you know, this is the last piece that we do, is we wrap it up and then we put it in our binder so that next year when we flip through, we find data and conclusions right then and there. This is something that I did even as an educator for Parks and Rec. I wrote, you know, field trip, 50 people attended, it was sunny, we talked about pollinators. All of that stuff is feels at the time like an additional workload, but again is going to just streamline how you plan in the future. So this will be great for you to look at once the webinar is over. And the event evaluation piece that I like the best is this final one, which is telling your story. So let me move my view of you all. Once you have evaluated your event, the last step is putting the final story together. You can do this by taking your feedback, data, and analysis and translating it into a presentation or event report. Include pictures, graphs, quotations, and observations. This document will help you disseminate important information to your board, sponsors, and fellow event planners. This is the part that allows you to use your creativity to kind of take your data and make it into something that somebody wants to read or hear about. So I love making presentations, as you can see, but again, even a 1-page Word document with a few pictures is going to allow even future media outlets, if they wanted to cover your event, to get a synopsis of what happened and how your board or your business association is going to take this event and keep the momentum moving forward. So I encourage you to use your own creative juices to come up with what this looks like. I've even seen in the digital era, like social media, like highlight or an Instagram reel that shows the best of the event and maybe like future things in the future that they're looking forward to. But this is the piece that's going to probably stick with most of the board and sponsors and event planners, rather than the nitty-gritty data that we often forget once we've looked at it. Here is a list of some things you can include in your final event presentation or your event report. You know, a summary, all of your objectives and your key achievements, that final budget compared to your projected budget. What was your marketing method? Highlighting sponsors and how they impacted your event. You know, oh, your donation of $500 allowed us to have X amount more vendors, or, you know, very clearly showing where their role played a big part. Any attendee feedback, areas of improvement, and then specifically your own recommendations. I really think that your voices are incredible pieces of insight for your business districts and the associations. So feel free at the end of your presentation or your report to say, going forward, I think this would be a much better event if we did, you know, ticketed sales, or if we started collecting RSVPs in the summer. All right, any questions about telling your story or suggestions? Oh, got a great piece of information in the chat just about creating work plans for our events and attaching documents and photos so that you can track all of the different pieces. That's awesome.
I can just say what I was at. It's called
Sure.
Maestro, and it was designed by a Main Street manager. And when he got hired away to a big company, they said, what do we need to design? And he said, this thing that you wouldn't donate. So it's a contact management system, but it's Main Street or business districts more specific. So work plans, membership, tracking buildings and owners and occupancy, and lots
Wow.
of the things that all of us are accountable for. And it's a whopping $50 a month. So it's
Okay.
really not hard to budget. And we're a 501c6, so we don't get the discounts on some of the corporate options that a 501c3 would get. So it was very much in our budget, and they usually fix any bugs before I get up in the morning because they're on the East Coast. So,
Wow. Well, I love another resource, and that is
Yeah.
in the chat. It's Maestro.
yeah.
Great.
And if anybody wants it, they can reach out to me in Albany. I can
Love
walk you
that.
through it or screen share.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And speaking of sharing the knowledge and sharing the wealth, let's wrap it up with our final discussion. So I know that some of you have thrown an event, either recently or in the past, that did not meet your objectives. How did you evaluate that? And what types of corrections do you plan on to make going forward? I'm not trying to single anybody out. I think that this is all a growing process, and that there's benefits to mistakes and failures, but I think it would be nice to end the discussion sort of like thinking about our own events and some of the ones that didn't go as planned, and then sharing what we did or what we want to do going forward to improve them. So let's stop the share and open the floor to anybody who feels vulnerable. Anybody have an event that they did not expect it to go that way? Sarah.
Oh, sure, I'll go again. Well, we just had an event in Gateway that I was not happy with the turnout. I felt like the engagement with businesses was definitely a success, but the engagement with the community was not very successful. And so, what was your question?
So you already answered that you like sort of tracked that there wasn't a lot of community people there, but going forward, do you have any ideas that would help prevent this problem from happening again, or things you're going to do differently?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's district by district. You know, in our district, I sort of realized that social media outreach is not necessarily the most successful way to engage members of our community. So more like boots on the ground kind of stuff I think would have been made it much more successful. And yeah, I mean, really, that was kind of the big takeaway for me.
And like, honestly, if we think back to the scientific method, I think that would be a great hypothesis. If I reach out to businesses in person, then, or if I reach out to the community in person, then more community members will attend.
Yeah.
And then you apply your event, make some more, get some analysis, and then finally draw a new conclusion. But that's a great example, Sarah. Thank you for sharing. And it's totally going to go great next time. There's going to be tons of people there.
So many people.
Sounds like there was another one that was very similar in the chat that said movie attendance was down semi post COVID, and then because of the movie choice maybe. So next year doing the blockbusters. That's a great another example we heard earlier. Anybody else want to share about an event? Getting down to the wire. Okay, well, if there's not any other events, then I'd like to use just the last 5 minutes, maybe for you to share with me some of your feedback about this webinar, some of your takeaways, if this webinar was good for answering questions or inspiring new approaches. As an event, this is a virtual event, so I'm asking for audience feedback to decide. Oh, a good question is, this is not related to my webinar per se, but how do you track the social media during or post event? Does anybody want to take that and answer it? So one way, yes. So one way is hashtags. Hashtags would be creating a specific hashtag that then when you click on the hashtag on Instagram or Facebook or even Twitter, it will generate all the posts that have been made with that hashtag. And then you can count 1, 2, 3, 4, how many posts were made. Insights on platforms. So yes, within the actual app itself, Instagram has an insight feature that will show you how many clicks, how many people got this sent to them. Facebook too, Twitter too. Yes, most of these social media platforms are going to have installed in them an insight function that will show you just what type of traction you're getting. And one other key piece about social media is that it's based on momentum. So the more traction the event is getting, the more clicks, the more likes, the more comments, the bigger your post will build. So we could go into a whole nother webinar about that. But anyway, let's just take it back to my final takeaways. Somebody was nice and said, wonderful resource. Anybody else want any takeaways? Oh, thank you, Sarah. Just getting some great jobs. Integrated marketing plans. Right, that's some more good insight about the social media function. And I'm glad it made you think. Sometimes my last thing is that sometimes we love positive feedback. I love it, don't get me wrong, but it is hard to gauge whether or not we've done a very good job. So this is another reminder that asking survey questions that actually help you get closer to what you want to know, as opposed to an open-ended, like, did you like it? So anyway, that's just based off of my feedback from this webinar. I'm glad you all liked it. If you have any additional feedback, feel free to share it. But otherwise, I hope you have a gorgeous rest of your Wednesday. We at the Events Hub can totally help you put together an event like presentation at the end or a form. So if you're in your district and you're like, I would love to do an event evaluation, but I'm kind of feeling tired after throwing the whole event, please reach out to, and I'll drop it in the chat, events@ventureportland.org. Portland.org. There we go. That is our events email. So without further ado, I will bid you all farewell. Thank you so much for attending. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Take care.